Hey everybody, so I wanted to go through and talk about a notice that was issued in the Federal Register last Friday by Secretary Kennedy. And it went into effect this Monday on March 3rd. And in the notice, it specifically stated that Secretary Kennedy and the Department of Health and Human Services was revoking what's called the Richardson Waiver. And I wanted to get in front of this because I got a couple of phone calls about it over the weekend. I also got several phone calls this week about it, about what are the implications associated with this. And I've seen letters that companies are issuing around this, imploring Secretary Kennedy to reinstate this Richardson waiver. I think it's important that we understand what it is and where it's coming from. So I'm going to show you on the computer. We're going to go through some of the federal law and what this waiver actually means, or the revoking of this waiver, what it does, and why it's happening. Okay, so when we go to the Federal Register, the actual notice that was issued by Secretary Kennedy, we can see, and I've downloaded the PDF. You can access it through the Federal Register as well, just looking at 03300, and it'll pull it up. It goes through, there's a summary and then supplementary information that it goes through. It's saying, hey, we're going to make changes as a department effective immediately, and they are rescinding what's called the Richardson Waiver here. And that is the reason that they're doing that is to further align with the Administrative Procedures Act, known as the APA. And down here is where it gets important. The APA specifically exempts matters relating to agency management or personnel or property or loans, grants, benefits, or contracts. Now, that's not the part I think that everybody was up in arms about. The part that everybody was up in arms about, that I've seen, at least in the letters and postings, was that the APA also permits the agency to forego these requirements for good cause, notice quotes, when the agency finds the procedures are impractical, unnecessary, or contrary to public interest. And it provides this United States Code section here. We're going to go look at that. Now, I think it's also important to understand what the Richardson Waiver did. And we will specifically look at the Richardson Waiver here shortly. Now, in the code, this is the actual federal law, United States Code, section 553. Down here, when we get to rulemaking, this is the section specifically in the Administrative Procedures Act on rulemaking. And it says this section applies according to the provisions thereof, except to the extent that there is involved, we're going to skip 1, 2, a matter relating to agency management, personnel, public property, loans, grants, benefits, or contracts. That's specifically what the Richardson Waiver covered. And that's it. Now, how do we know that? Well, we can actually go back to when the Richardson Waiver was issued back in the 1970s. This is all documented evidence associated with where all of this came from. And in the Federal Register back then, there is this specific section, public participation in rulemaking. The reason that they were doing this was to engage the public more. So down here at the very bottom paragraph, we see effective immediately all agencies and offices of the department, in this case DHHS, which issues rules or regulations regarding public property contracts, so on and so forth, will participate through the APA public notice procedures, which is what it quotes. The reason that they had that, and it says, although it permits exceptions for good cause, they wanted to used sparingly. So they had the ability to use the good cause rule back then. This was 1971, right? So now going back here, we look at this. That's that only section. And the reason that they were doing that was to engage the public more specifically in areas where the law excluded it. And at the time they said, okay, well, no, we want to go ahead and issue these and to solicit public input. it was very clear, like what's going on with our current administration is cutting unnecessary burden and cost. Well, most of these end up not getting any public comments anyway because it's administrative functions. So they were going through an era of transparency back then that's different than the area of transparency that's going on now. Where the confusion was coming in for, I think, a lot of individuals is that this section here, forego the requirements of for good cause. So when we go and we look at that specific section of law, it's the rulemaking section. Now it's A2 is what we were talking about. Now notice we're going to a different section, B for B. And down here, it says that except when notice or hearing of the statute, this subsection shall not apply when the agency for good cause, let's see if we can highlight that. When the agency for good cause, well, it's not going to work with us, incorporates findings in a brief statement of the reasons, therefore, in the rules issued, that notice of public procedure are impractical, unnecessary, or contrary to public interest. So the important component here is that the Richardson Waiver never covered this. So by telling the secretary to reinstate the Richardson Waiver, it doesn't change this section of law. He has no authority over that section of law. Who has the authority over the section of law? Congress. So Congress is the one who wrote the Administrative Procedures Act and enacts legislative changes to this, and tells the administrative arms and departments what they can and can't do. So he's saying, we're not going to do this, which he's deemed unnecessary. I'm not getting into the political side of it, of whether I think it is or not. But that's what he's revoking right here. Well, and that's so before Richardson, they could use good cause. And after Richardson, they could use good cause. So either way, that section is completely defunct, right? So it's something that they have the ability to do anyway. So they have to specifically follow what that means then. General notice of proposed rulemaking shall be published in the Federal Register. So they still have to publish in the Federal Register, except for these matters that he said, hey, we're not going to publish on these anymore. And if there's something that has good cause, it has to have justification associated with it. Well, how do we know what that is? Well, in the notes, way down here, we'll go to 270. Notice of public participation are impractical. Now, these are the notes on how judicially we've evaluated what is impractical and necessary. Okay, so as you can see, we've gone through and now we understand what the notice does, what revoking the Richardson Waiver did for the public comment process of the Federal Register. We understand that what the Administrative Procedures Act and how it governs. We also understand why it's so important that we go back to the source authority and understand who governs that authority, in this case, Congress. And how re-implementation of the Richardson Waiver doesn't necessarily solve the concerns that I've seen in a lot of letters. So when we have a notice in Federal Register, there's always some underlying information that requires research and going and looking and talking to others. So anytime that changes are made, know that the public still has a voice. There's still a mechanism, and there's checks and balances associated with it. Are they going to get everything right? Definitely not, right? But that's why we have checks and balances in the system as well. So hope this video was helpful. Until next time, happy learning.